Do we know the medium? Do we know the scale? Do we know when this work was made? Do we know what her real issues are? I mean, this is kind of a pile, right? It's not very helpful. Well, so what I wanted to do, because we're turning all the negatives into positives, is I wanted to share with you one of my great, amazing students, Colleen McGann. She is a budding film student, and she offered, I asked my students, would you give me a before and an after? Because I felt like the after is as important for you guys as the before, because there's never a shortage on road rat artist statements. But this will give you a window into what we're really looking for in terms of real articulation. So Colleen's first artist statement, and this was when she started my class. Ever faked a good mood? Have you ever tried to get over something painful by acting like it never occurred? Ever feel like you got away with fooling someone into thinking you are more comfortable than you really are? Has it ever worked? How long does it take for the way you truly feel to encumber you? How long before your secret becomes a burden so heavy and awkward you have no choice but to unload it somewhere or on someone? And then we have the denouement, Bootlegger, which is actually the name of the piece. It's a short film that exposes a compound moment of becoming aware of the mouth. I mean, okay, so I said to her, and she's an incredible student, so she was actually able to use transformation pretty readily. But I said, the same things I was asking Yvonne. You're on a panel. What is this doing for me, seriously? Except frustrating me. Actually, probably the things that it evokes for me are mostly negative. It makes me ask more, not fewer questions. It makes me frustrated. It makes me think she's trying to pull one over on me. All those things. When in fact, the purpose of the artist statement is not to wow us with how well you know Foucault, and you know as well as I do. You don't know it as well as you say you do. It's that the artist statement is meant to illuminate the work. And there's I came up with this a while ago, and it has stood me in beautiful stead. It's this simple. Answer the who, what, why, when, where, how. That's it. Answer them. Answer them, sit down, answer those questions. And you have an artist statement. So that was Colleen before. She's very cute. She wrote before and after for me. So that was Colleen before. And now I want to read you Colleen after. Which didn't even, at the time she ended up hitting it this well, it didn't even need any further revisions. Bootlegger is a short film that exposes a complex moment in which a young woman becomes aware of the debilitating habit of denial. This character recognizes the profound burden she chooses to bear due to her inability to psychologically and emotionally expose a trauma she skillfully camouflaged. As a 20-something, she is rapidly losing the naivete that allowed her to stay in this situation, but unable to internally summon the wisdom she desires to solve her problem. In order to regain control of her life and remedy her encumbered state, she must draw insight from her surroundings. The weight of her past must yield to her desire to grow. This video exists in 2 acts and is performed by 2 women. The women are separated through various devices that include context, place, time, and aesthetic treatment. This strategy is meant to underline 3 specific dichotomies: youth and age, past and present, sickness and health. For the main character, existing in the middle of 2 points is like living in a cloud of confusing tension. Can and will she identify this transitory position as a potential source of empowerment and clarity? The narrative is relayed through both the actions of the characters on screen and through narration. A monologue is performed off-screen by the main character and spoken in the first person. I chose this method in order to give, it gives me bumps because she did such a great job. I chose this method in order to give the main character a voice, a human spirit, which invites the audience to empathize with her struggle for resolution. Can you believe that before and after? Colleen, girlfriend, you are hot. That's an amazing before and after. This gives a whole window. You may never see Colleen McGann's work, but you can picture what it might be like. You can picture who's involved. You could even fantasize about what her image-making process might be. And that's what you want your statement to do. So now we're moving on to resumes and CVs. Resumes and CVs are a whole other world that bring up a lot of insecurities in artists. They are tough because they're competitive by nature. You walk into any gallery, what's the first thing they want you to look at? The statement and the resume. I don't think there's anybody here that hasn't at one point felt like their resume wasn't good enough. I certainly go through it all the time. There are colleagues who have 14-page CVs as opposed to 5. And there are people who have 900 exhibitions at much better venues. It's an inherently competitive document, and consequently brings up all this emotional baggage. But there are formulas and systems, and I just wanted to explain first the difference between a resume and a CV, and explain how you can use the CV, if you're given the opportunity, to really flesh out a life that may be beyond the Chelsea gallery idea of what an artist's resume is supposed to look like. So first of all you need in order to start this process is to go to College Arts Guidelines online and just download their forms, because they have forms for what should appear on a resume and a CV. So it's very simple. They give you a template, basically. Now the artist's resume is actually a much more rigid document. It's only interested in your artistic output and practice, period. End of sentence. It is not interested, for instance, in my special projects in cultural development, way out in the backwoods of Serbia. No interest in that. It's not relevant to what I'm showing at the time. It's narrow in that it wants your education, your gallery shows, your awards, your bibliography, and that's kind of it, with a few exceptions. But the idea is, who are you as an artist? What you will notice is when you go to people's websites, a lot of people mount their CVs instead of their resume, or both. But if given the opportunity to choose, I tell emerging and even mid-career artists to choose the CV over the resume, because the CV allows a much wider range of interesting information about yourself, and it also allows you an opportunity to make up some headings. So for instance, if you do a lot of special projects, now keep in mind it doesn't need to be art related, and my students, the first iterations of this, they always go like, grade aid, special attendant, 2005 to no. I mean, it needs to be artistic in its scope. But the definitions of what's artistic in its scope are more holistic, frankly, and more forgiving and more interesting. So for instance, on my CV, I have a section I call special projects, which could include everything from, consulting on a papermaking initiative in Venezuela to strategic planning with Center for Book Arts. Because, I've actually done a lot of different things in my career, and they may not really show up on my resume. But that's a classic category that could show up on a CV that wouldn't necessarily show up on a resume. But what CAA's guidelines will do is give you a ton of great ideas for headers. And then what I recommend to you, and a project I give my students, is to go all the way back to high school. Don't do writing, but go back all the way to high school and look at the patterns in your life for special projects. Because what occasionally happens is actually it doesn't happen occasionally, it happens all the time. There are things you're totally forgetting. And practically every time I go back to my CV, I'm like, oh, I've left out, this whole window into my world. And by going back significantly and remembering literally every organization you participated in, every project you've done, it will help you move towards getting this body of information together. The truth is, if you haven't done that, it's really important for your archiving purposes as much as it is for your presentation purposes. Because once you lose these things, it's very painful to try to recover. And an example of this is, I have a good friend who's a very brilliant ethnographic filmmaker, and he could strangle him. I wanted to show this before and after, but I actually thought it would be too humiliating for him. He neglected to write down all of his bibliography. Well, good luck. I mean, he's been doing 15 years of writing. So now a lot of that stuff is lost. And he doesn't know where it's cataloged, he doesn't even remember the titles. So part of the job you're doing for yourself too is also creating an archive of information.